everybody. David.Fogel, CEO of the Symphonina Foundation, back with you for another Symphonina Foundation podcast. And it's my delight today to be joined by concert touring pianist Chetan Tierra, also co-founder of San Diego Piano Academy. And I met Chetan a few years ago through my colleague Gary Gray. And Chetan performed on our very first album, introducing the Symphonina. He played the piano on my Symphonina number 2 at Green Music on their Yamaha CFX piano, if I remember all that correctly. I hope I do. Chetan,
yes.
So Chetan, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a bit. You've been doing your thing. You've got a new addition to your family since we probably met the last time.
A 19-month-old now.
19,
yeah.
I know. It's been almost 2 years probably since I saw your last performance. And I hope everything's going just great for you.
Yes. Yeah. I'll tell you, that first year is wild, having a baby.
That's true.
And it still is a little bit, but the joy is really exponentially every month getting more in there.
19 months. Well, you're about to hit the terrible twos, as they say. So I wish you luck, my friend. Here we go.
Thank you. I need it.
But in the meantime, I have to say, it's just such a delight working with you on the album first, and I greatly appreciate all the support you've given to us. You've also been a judge for our composer contest for the last 2 years for the best Symphonina of the year. So thank you for that. Let's go talk a little bit about how you got into piano in the first place, and then what made you decide to go into being a touring concert pianist.
Okay. What got me into it?
Yeah.
My dad got me into it. My hippie dad, I will say. He was one of the original hippies from San Francisco in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
And so I was born at home, which allowed him to take me to the piano 1 hour after I was born. And he would tie me to his lap and practice himself. And it was almost every day he was doing that until he started pointing to a note in the middle of some crazy Chopin or something, and I would play that note. And then he would sit with me every day until I was 8 and got a more traditional teacher.
That's great.
That's what got me into it.
That's incredible, really. So what is your first memory then sitting at the piano, or what is your first memory?
Oh my gosh. I don't know my first memory, probably not that, but I do consider the piano as being such an extension of me because of that. It's like seeing the black and white. It's like having a third arm that's just part of you.
Yeah.
So it's ingrained for sure.
When you were young and all the way up to 8, were you practicing, I guess, every day then? And I mean, what kind of diligence did you have as a young kid to play piano?
My dad was a big part of it. And I remember this saying all the time: it takes blood, sweat, and tears to be good at it. And certainly, I am very grateful for everything my dad has given me in that sense. However, it wasn't without its ups and downs. And the fights between my dad were very real. I remember many of those sessions ended in tears, and that was the tears part of blood, sweat, and tears. That being said, some of that is necessary in order to grind it out, as one says. So I would say diligent, but it became really serious in my teen years when I was able to consider the options. Do I want to do homework for the rest of my life, whether it be pushing papers, a bunch of emails, or do I want to practice? Practicing won, certainly, and it definitely was my ticket to college. So I spent a lot more hours in front of the piano than I did accelerating in math, for instance.
Where did you go to college, Jake?
I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music after transferring from Oberlin. I went to Oberlin for a year and then moved to Cleveland, which is on the street.
Yeah, Cleveland, you're surrounded by just outstanding musicians of all types, right? I mean, it's a great environment.
Same with Oberlin, though.
Oh, yeah,
same with Oberlin. Oberlin is one of the best undergrad conservatories. They don't have a grad school. And I would say that was my big reason for transferring, was Cleveland had more of the top-end international talent, the grad students. And Sergei Babian was a teacher there who I think might be the best teacher in the world. And so I needed to be around those students doing things to push me to do those things.
We can cover so many things in the time we have, but everything you just said, I could go in 3 different directions, but let me just pick one. What makes a teacher the best teacher in the world?
Oh my gosh. So
it's a good question, really.
Yeah, well, and I'm trying to give a thoughtful answer.
Yeah, fair enough.
there's a mystique around Babian, and I was never his student, so I didn't study with him at Cleveland. But his other students really pushed me, and I became direct competitors with them slash colleagues. There's just a mystique, and I would hear how his students play, and there's this undeniable sound that they have at the piano. The most famous of his students now is Daniil Trifonov, who I think many of us know at this point, a world-class international concert pianist. And I was lucky enough to be in that bubble when he was coming up there with some of that elite talent. But I remember some of the students that would graduate from his studio would just hang around Cleveland to stay around Babian and his studio classes, and just it was a cult following for sure. Mm-hmm. And then and so you see how successful all of his students were, and just the top end talent that he had. But also the stories from around the country, different conservatories. When I was competing internationally, everyone knew Babian, and it was just, I would say it all comes together to point to him as being certainly one of the greatest in the world.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, different teachers probably have different affinity for different students and vice versa. So what works well for one student might not work well for every student, of course, but you have to find that match, probably like a graduate advisor in college. If you're doing a master's or a PhD, you want to have that mesh, right? But then it's on the teacher to bring out as much of the student as he or she reasonably can. Like, hopefully not unreasonably, but reasonably.
Yes,
right.
Well, I'd like to add to that, because that's such a bullseye, and not every teacher is best for every student. There's kind of that classic teaching stereotype that they beat a student down, so to speak, and it's just it's brutal. And I never did well with that kind of teacher. I was so sensitive, particularly then, and I would take it personally. And if I felt defeated, it didn't motivate me to practice. I needed to believe that I had it in me. And so I had a wonderful teacher, Antonio Pompabaldi. I have to say his name because he's a true master. He's now the head of the CIM piano department. That's the Cleveland Institute of Music. He just made me feel like I had it in me. And boy, did I work hard for him.
I think I would say the same for my grad school, which obviously, is not in music, it was in math and engineering, but I was accepted at a PhD program at University of Hawaii. And I'll leave the professors' names out of this to protect them should they still be alive. But my advisor,
I'm sure they'd be honored.
My advisor there for the PhD part was going to be, he's very aggressive and a put downish kind of person. And I have too much ego for that, I guess, is the answer. My ego's a bit better these days, but when I was 23, that's not going to work. So now that's funny. You say ego. I called it sensitivity, but yeah, I think it's one and the same. It could be. It could be. But it's my own foible. I think in my case, I'm not sure sensitivity could be a strong suit as a musician, maybe not as a mathematician. But in any event, coming back to UCSD, I got very, very fortunate. My advisor at UCSD was wonderful, extremely supportive, but still, I had to work very hard, and he passed away not too long ago, unfortunately. But I was very fortunate to work with somebody in that regard in my career too. And I think it's probably true regardless of what you're studying, what you're trying to get good at. If you have that good relationship with the teacher who can, like I said, reasonably get you to get everything that you can be without unreasonably beating you up since you hate what you become, something like that.
Right.
That's the trick. And I suppose you have to do that too at San Diego Piano Academy for all the students that you come in contact with who want to work with you. How do you go about figuring out what is the best approach with each student?
Sure. Well, I think ultimately I'm trying to be the teacher that I would have wanted to have and that I did have. So I consider myself a nice guy teacher. But there's very few that will be pickier than me as well. But I do believe in the best playing is confident playing. So if a student doesn't have confidence, you're stuck to begin with. Not to mention, with all the distractions today, you need them to believe in the work that they're doing. You want them to work very hard. And that's the thing that I'm probably the most proud of is every single one of my students, they really bust their ass for me. I am both very lucky, but I also believe that I'm able to bring out that motivation in them. And I'm lucky that they do very well.
Yeah, I've heard a few of them perform live, and of course, the performance has been excellent. I mean, at every just a joy, really. And I wish all your students, ones particularly the ones I've heard, every success. Is there anything that you can point to, like if a student is struggling in any particular way, that you would give them either encouragement or advice to help them through that, maybe not valley of death as we call it sometimes, but just that whatever we want to call it, that period of time.
There's no, that's a loaded question, and we could spend a half hour probably dissecting that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that ultimately it comes down to why behind everything. Like, why are you doing this? And that why question, almost like a 2-year-old. Why is the sky blue? Well, because of this. Well, why? Because of that. Why?
Yeah.
You know, kind of that joke.
Yeah.
But that's what you need to get to the bottom of with your students. And when they both believe that they have it in them to do it, and you give them the practicing skills to be able to do it, and then you show them that it's possible, and then you get to the bottom of their why, it should take care of itself at that point.
So I guess I could summarize that up a little bit. There's a bit of psychology that we have to do as teachers to try to understand what the psyche is, not just the technique or how to get the expression we're looking for, or performance or appearance or whatever it might be that's part of the performance or composition, but also
100%.
Understanding the motivation and what the problems are and what the distractions are and everything else that's going on in that person's
I would say
life.
Teaching is 40 to 50% psychology.
Like 90% is half mental or something, that you would be very good to say, whatever it was. Right? Let's go back to when you were touring more. You still perform, but you used to tour a lot. What were some of the highlight experiences that you might want to share with our listeners about your time performing in different places?
Believe it or not, my favorite, besides the moment of being on stage, there's something very magical about that connection with the audience, and especially if you're fully prepared and the nerves can dissipate at that point. There's something so magical about that moment. It's pure meditation, really. But it's the culture. It's being able to be. I remember being in South Africa for a bit, and in Korea, Seoul, Korea, and Europe. Just immersing in those cultures was my favorite part of everything.
It's interesting. So do you find, okay, so let's separate that out for a little bit. So you get to travel, you get to immerse yourself in different cultures, as you say. I have interviewed several other people who are touring performers, particularly violinists, but also pianists. And sometimes their schedules are such that they're in for a little bit in a place, and then they maybe have a day to see something, and then they have to go to the next thing. But it sounds like you were able to give yourself a little bit more time to enjoy the places that you performed. Does that sound right?
Yes, I mean, I never had the schedule that maybe some of those others that you've talked to have had, where they're performing 150 dates out of the year. That's wild, and I struggled with that. There were certainly pockets, 3-4 months, where it was wild, just a lot of traveling, a lot of performing. And I'm not someone who does well with jet lag, and that does well with new locations and things like that. As well, I loved it. I would come back so exhausted. So I really admire those that have the constitution to make it through those grueling day and nights.
On the other hand, if you're doing that, you're not having the experience that you had to enjoy the places that you're staying. So there's that trade-off, right? Of like everything in life, you can't do everything. Like, can't be at all.
Sure.
So
but there is something nice. So you practice hard for one weekend, and then you have another concert 3 or 4 days later. The practicing for one concert pays off for the next concert. And where mine were probably more a couple weeks apart here and there. And so the consistent practicing had to stay in check.
Yeah, there's another thing that happens, I think, for piano players particularly, and I recognize this again last year I was playing at my wife's sister's wedding, got asked to play classical music. So as you know, I was a jazz pianist here in town for 16 years, and confidence in a jazz setting is not an issue, but confidence playing classical in front of 150 people at a wedding, haven't done that in a while. So a lot of practice to go to get to the, and it's just Mozart Sonata 1 and 2, Clemente Sonatinas. We're not talking like things you would play or things you would play in your sleep, Chetan. But here I am, and you get to the piano and it's not your piano, and if you're a violinist or you're a sax player or whatever, wherever you're going, it's your instrument, you know it, you play it, it's the same, it's what you left it, except maybe maybe your reed broke, or you have to fix something, whatever it is, but generally you're familiar with your instrument. When you're traveling as a pianist, you get to the next piano and it's not the same piano. So for me, I would say in that situation, like I could not get that thing to play as soft as I wanted it to be, and it was really a struggle to perform it at the level that I wanted to. But I'm guessing maybe at the world-class level, when you're traveling, there's a little bit more care that's put into regularizing what the instrument will be. But I'm going to ask you, is that true, or is there a large variation in piano performance as you go from place to place?
There's a large variation.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, and even just hearing you say it, I think all pianists are jealous of violinists, reed instruments, because they get to travel with their own instrument. But I always tell my students that's part of the art, being able to transition to different instruments. And the truth is, that's why I always say the best artists, they play with their ears and not with their fingers or their voice or whatever you have it. If you're listening, then it's much easier to transition to the sounds you want to make on a new instrument. Plus, a few good practicing tips when you get to a new instrument will help you acclimate. Even if you have 15, 20 minutes and you sit there and just drill a little bit, like nice, loud, strong fingers, slow, about half tempo, you can acclimate to a new instrument fairly quickly.
I bet there's a skill to that too, right? Like everything else.
Absolutely.
The more you do that, the more you can adapt quickly.
Yeah.
The skill of adaptation as opposed to the skill of drilling or the skill of something else,
The greatest teacher is experience at that point.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I remember on one of your performances, you were talking about memorizing pieces, which is definitely not one of my strong suits. But if I remember correctly, you were saying you basically memorize some kind of one measure at a time so that you can jump in at any point and continue to tell the story. Do I have that right?
Totally. And it was born out of necessity for me. Certainly I've had teachers tell me some of those things, but it took being in the semifinals of I would say a medium plus sized international competition. And semifinals, I was nailing the round, just felt on top of the world. And I had to skip most of the last page of my last piece, just a memory problem. I held it together, enough to get an applause at the end. But of course, the jury knew I skipped quite a good portion of some very difficult measures. And at that point, I vowed to never let that happen again. And it's been 15 years. I've never had a train wreck like that on stage since. And I feel like I have it down to a little bit of a science to fully be able to trust it. And you're right. Yeah. Every 2 to 4 depending on the piece, sometimes phrases, you have to be able to start each one of those measures off the top of your head. And then being able to hit those measures backwards is the key. Because if you're going forwards, your muscle memory will help you get into the next measure, of course. And so by being able to start at each one of these measures, I think of this analogy like you're driving down a very dark tunnel. And that's playing the piece. It's that dark tunnel, and the goal is to get out the other side. And by knowing these checkpoints, I call them, it's like putting up little light posts in the tunnel that allow you to visualize the way. So that's a big one. And then the other one, whenever possible, have each hand memorized separately.
So it takes a long time then to commit all that to memory for any piece that you're going to be working on. I would have to.
Less than you might think. So the key is the preparation. to first learn those checkpoints and to memorize hands separately, it's kind of like learning a different piece. It will be confusing at first, but once you get it, you just hit it once a week. Takes 20 minutes maybe, depending on the size of the piece, and I call that maintenance. That's effortless. So it's just a matter of putting in that upfront investment.
That's cool. And so, and the backwards part, I'm guessing in the analogy, it'd be like going through the tunnel backwards or in random segments or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll do that with my students. I'll be like, section 12, let's hear that. Section 9, let's hear that next.
Yeah. Kara Hoover was saying something along those lines about getting her students to play each measure from the end to the beginning, one at a time. And it's similar, I think, to what you're saying, where you kind of are learning the piece sort of out of the context, but then you don't have, when the context fails you, you don't have that as your crutch to rely on. You have your foundation that you've learned each phrase or each measure or whatever.
Totally. Well, and the truth is it never really will take away that nervous feeling or the elevated heart rate that one feels. But if you can solidify those checkpoints, then you can at least trust that the worst case scenario won't happen. And then that excitement, nervous feeling enhances the artistic product of the music. And so we can use those nerves to our advantage.
And I think your point about confidence is really well taken, because at least for me, I would say when I'm doing things that are artistic and I have full confidence in what I'm doing, it allows my brain to go think about other things than worrying about how I'm playing or what I'm going to play or anything else. You can go to all the detail that you wouldn't be able to devote your brain power to because it's already locked in, so to speak, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's true for me anyway. So, well, what are you working on currently that we might be able to either come to one of your performances this year, either in San Diego or somewhere else, or alternatively, how about your students? What are they working on?
Right now, this spring, it's busy season for my students, competition season, as I call it.
Yeah.
I see the year sort of divided into two segments. There's the competition season where we're grinding, comparing with other students, and just polishing to the top level that we can get to. But then the other half of the year, I call it artistic season, where you just want to forget about all of that and focus on your own relationship with the instrument and things like that. But yeah, so I have some students, they just did pretty well in a local concerto competition, 2 second prizes and a third prize. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be competing for state here in about a month. So I have a couple of plans this summer for myself, nothing to say yet. There's a concert I'll be doing in September, but yeah, there's a few things lined up.
Sounds good. Do you ever give yourself the indulgence of performing something other than classical music at the highest levels? Do you ever like pull out a ragtime book or some blues or a jazz thing or do anything like that?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I used to be a songwriter, and I actually was in a band. We won Best New Artist in San Diego in 2017. Since then, I've been mostly a businessman, building up the San Diego Piano Academy, of course, but yes, I compose in a minimalist, modern style, I would say, and that is my creative outlet. It's nothing towards high art. It's just pure self-meditative indulgence, and I think that's really important.
Do you do it just for yourself, or can we listen to it online? Do you have anything out there streaming that we can hear?
Yes, certainly. On my website, ChetanTierra.com, I'm sure you'll provide a link somewhere.
I'll be happy to. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably selling myself short. I have a lot of students that play my music, and it's something that I may put more effort into in the future, but it's tough when you have more ideas than there are hours in the day.
and you have a 19-month-old and a wife too, so
oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I know you know about those issues as well. You're one of the most prolific people I've met.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, fortunately, my kids are 19 years instead of 19 months. So those days, my friend, are long behind me. And,
does that really make it easier, though?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. Good to know.
You have that to look forward to. There is a tunnel, and you don't get to do it backwards or in different segments. You just have to go through the tunnel. But
There you go.
you will find as you go through it, and probably if you get to have another child or whatever, you'll start the tunnel all over again, a little wiser. That's all it goes. But for me, it was twins, so you didn't get, we just it is what it is. So yes, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. But in your case, it's very, very far in the future, my friend. So
yes, yeah.
In terms of people getting into professional music, let me ask one final question here. How has it changed from the times, let's say, when you were touring consistently to today? What are the major differences, and is there any different skill sets that people need beyond being a great pianist or a great musician for whatever instrument they have that will help them succeed in, let's say, the next hopefully 5 to 10 years of professional performance?
Sure, I can definitely answer the latter part of that. In terms of what's changed, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on that. I think that we all can agree the world is changing more rapidly than we all can even mention at this point. So I will say this, 20 years ago when I was coming up, there were more gatekeepers in terms of getting into the industry than there are now with social media, streaming. We can do it ourselves. You can build your own fan base. And I think with that brings a new set of skills that are important. And what always blew my mind was it wasn't always the best musicians that had the most successful careers. Certainly, the craft has to be at the top of one's list in terms of building success. If you don't have the goods, then nobody's going to want to spend time with hearing you. But you have to know how to work with people. I think people skills is maybe the most important thing one can cultivate. And a sense of entrepreneurship, whether that's specifically building your own business or just having some of those skills in your back pocket when navigating the world.
And I guess if you're not good at those skills, or you find yourself not being able to make the progress you want, then finding who you can team with, who can help you along those lines, because maybe not everybody's good at everything they need to be good at to be successful.
But isn't that its own skill, knowing how to ask for help? Definitely.
Yes, exactly right. And being open to those collaborations and things too.
So I think it takes a combination of humility to be able to ask for help. It takes people skills, and it takes that level of boldness.
And knowing too what you can offer people who are helping you, right? So that it's not all about helping you; it's how you can help them too.
Always keep your listener take your listener into account.
Yeah. Chetan, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
It's my website, ChetanTierra.com, and you can also find me at SanDiegoPianoAcademy.com. That's a great start.
All right, CHETAN. And then Tierra.com, everybody.
TIERRA, yes.
That's right. Chetan, thanks so much. We'll listen to some more of your great piano work on the way out here. And if I can ever be of help to you, just let me know.
My pleasure. Thank you, David.